Hey everyone, I'm back. It's been a while. I wasn't even gonna. I wasn't planning on doing podcast stuff for a while, but then as always, something came up, and I was like, I should put this online. But this is the second video episode of the year. It's January 18th, and I haven't even put up the other episode yet. It's been crazy. I mean, besides the missile threat, I had guests over, and that was fun. And then in preparation for that, the the taller half went back to work and a travel schedule, and then we were just preparing the house to have guests, and just putting things away and decorating and things like that. And then I was just kind of like not gonna record or anything. I just didn't feel like it. I was like, I'm only gonna do it when I feel like it, not on schedule. So anyway, I feel like it now, and I'm recording in the bathroom. Hopefully, it's clearer than outside because it's like a really crazy wind tunnel, like pushing trees over and stuff. So I was like, okay, why don't I just do it in my bathroom? It's a good size. It's not like, I don't know. I live in a studio apartment, and my bathroom is really like a legit room. Like someone decided, like, no, the bathroom shouldn't be like a little crawl space. It should be really nice. So that's what I'm filming. I mean, recording right now, and eventually I'll have like a bench and stuff and more plants in here, and it'll be great. But yeah, let's get into the topic, which is debt. And I know that's like a personal topic for people, and they don't like to talk about it, and it's really weird and like sensitive. So I'll just do it for you. I'll put myself out there, and then I will tell you what I learned about I will tell you what debt taught me, and hopefully you'll, like, whether you agree with my conclusions or not, hopefully you'll be able to look at your situation and see what debt represents in your life. But I also think that the conclusion that I came to this time is actually something that needs to be said out loud, because it's not part of a narrative that I've heard ever outside of my brain just like an hour ago. And I think sometimes if you don't have perspective, or I think sometimes having different perspectives outside of the popular narrative is what triggers people to actually look at things without judgment. So right now there's a popular narrative. Well, we'll get into it. We'll get into what the popular narrative is. But first I just want to show you, let me just walk you down my process, okay? So it's 2018, and I didn't get any debt in my life, like significant debt, long-standing debt, or anything until I think it was like the end of 2010 was when the habits were building, and then 2011 was when I first had actual legitimate worries about my debt. So that's whatever years from now. Let's say that it was like 8 to 7 years, and let's say for the sake of argument that things happen in a 9-year cycle. So if things happen in a 9-year cycle and we're closing in on it, then that means the insights that I've gotten today in this beginning of this year are going to be the reason that I close out that cycle being of debt. Does that sound confusing? Yeah, it should be. It's not like I knew all this stuff ahead of time, and it's not that I knew like why 9 years, why am I thinking about debt right now, why. No, like literally I just was walking and I thought about what should I have learned, or what did I learn from debt, and then it came out of me, and then this is where we're at. So if you have resistance to anything I just said, yeah, of course it's natural. Why wouldn't you? Doesn't sound normal, doesn't sound logical, sounds crazy, sounds like crazy talk. And that's how, you know I used to think about a lot of things, but now I just don't question. If something pops in my head and I think about it and then I come out with something, then that's what we're talking about today. Same for you. Like, just because something doesn't make sense and it's not part of any type of conversation doesn't mean it doesn't belong in your head. Like, whatever, you have enough time and space, things are going to pop in there. They're not always bad. So this is what popped in my head today. So I was going through what I was trying to figure out was, there's something that I did not know about debt. So that's today. I didn't know something about debt. When I had debt, there was something I didn't know about debt. Before I had debt, there was something I didn't know about debt. When I first ever touched money, there was something I didn't know about debt. And instead of thinking about the debt itself. I was thinking like, okay, let me just try to understand it and then see what comes out after that. So let's go back to before 2010. Here's what I first thought about debt. I thought that all debt was dangerous. So I had heard about it. It was like a boogeyman. I felt like it was a trap, but it was a mysterious trap. Like I didn't know how it trapped you or why people got into trouble with credit cards or anything. I just knew that they were bad and that once you got tangled up in them, you'd get stuck. And then I also didn't understand the benefits, so I didn't want one at all. And then so later on, people were like, oh, you have to establish credit, or in order to get this something, you needed, a credit card. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That makes sense. We have to have credit, so let me get a credit card and establish credit so that in the future I can do the things that you need to do with credit. I also didn't understand how people could get trapped. For me, it was, I didn't know if it was like a mental thing, if it was a need-based thing, if it was a greed thing. I had zero idea. And at that time I had no debt, so I had like nothing to go off of except for other people's horror stories or other people's self-righteous stories about how they don't have debt. And when I first got my card, I used one of those like bank cards where you pay, like you put up $500 and then you give it to the bank and the bank's like, okay, this is your credit line. It's like a practice card and you can't really go over it and you can't incur debt because technically you already paid for that. So that's the card that I had. And then eventually and then I had good credit. So eventually I graduated to cards that gave you rewards. So it'd be like super high interest rate, and no annual fees, but they would give you really good cashback rewards or travel rewards or whatever. I always picked cards that if I were to use them, if I had to use them, I would use them in a way where they'd give me money back. And there's a bunch of those cards, like if you have really good credit. And then I thought that so this is the way that I thought about money at that time, was that the credit cards didn't give me financial freedom and they didn't give me abundance. They were just a thing that I needed to develop credit. What I thought gave me the most freedom and power and, just kind of like the security that I needed was savings. So I was big on savings, not on credit cards. Like credit cards were still like, okay, necessary evil. But for me, the big thing that I focused on in terms of making money and, moving money around was on my savings. So if I had good savings, I felt amazing. Like if I had $10 credit line, but I had a conservative amount of savings, let's say, I'll just say my real number. My real number was about 10,000. I felt good. Like it didn't matter what my income was. It didn't matter anything. As long as I didn't touch the 10,000 or I added to it and I didn't have debt, it didn't matter how much I made. Can't even make nothing as long as I wasn't touching that stuff. And that's how I felt secure, and sometimes even like not cocky, because at that time I didn't feel cocky, but I just felt like, okay, I'm doing well and I'm on the path to being even richer or better off because I at least have savings. That was king for me. And then what else did I think at that time? At that time, the way I thought of it was outflow of money was negative. So what I mean by that is like, how some people have money and the reason they have money is because they want to spend. So like, oh, I can't wait to get a paycheck so I can spend. Like for me, an outflow of money was negative. So paying bills was a negative thing. So like it didn't make sense to me even to like have a credit card with an annual payment, because I was like, no, money is going out. Like money shouldn't go out ever. Like I didn't view money as like a in and out thing. Like you get money and then you spend money. For me, it was like, I guess I told you, like saving was the most important thing. So even having a credit card just meant more ways to use money, like to waste money, to spend money. So I didn't view it as like, oh, the more credit I have, the more I can spend. Like, no, that to me, that was It's like, no, not the more credit you have, the more you can spend. Like, if you can't save it, then what's the point of this credit? Is how I thought. Which, I mean, I can't say good or bad. I'm just saying that's how I thought of it. Where did I get that belief from? Clearly got that belief from the Latin side of my family, where money in abundance is not something that you spread out or spend or put out there. Like, not even for self-care, not even for the best food, not even for the best clothes, not even for basic comforts. The point of money was to hold it because of the sense of security. Like, hold it and then build a home. Hold it and feed your family. But not so much that you spend it unnecessarily. And I'm going to put unnecessarily in quotes because literally it was like better to spend $1 on cheap food than not have $9 in the bank. You know, it's like if you had $10, it would be better to spend only $1 and get whatever and put whatever in your body than it was to save the $9. That was the mentality that I picked up from my family. And I can't say like it's all Mexicans or it's all whatever. It's just what I picked up, and I noticed culturally around the place that I live, for that demographic, for that income level, for those people who came from certain towns, it's like not cities, towns in Mexico that also came to the US. This is how I saw them spending money, and what I noticed was like the respected and common theme among them. Okay, so that's how I first thought about money. This is all before I had debt. Then round two, and there's no like time, like the reason I can't say like year this to year that is because the way that I started thinking about my debt was not like a hard line, like now I think this. It was like, oh, I can see from my spending habits and like what's going on that these are the underlying beliefs and conditions and realities that I was having at that time unconsciously. So when I say round two, that means now there's a shift. I don't know what that shift came from or why. I probably could dig around, but it's like, what's the point? Just as long as I know where the shift was and what it was, that's good enough for me. So in this second shift, I was like, okay, it seemed like credit cards were a form of help and support. So, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I need this. I don't want to ask anyone. Oh, look, I have a credit card. Like, oh, look, I have some credit. I can just use that. I don't want to ask anyone for gas money. Use my card. I don't want to ask my boss for a raise. I'll just use my credit card. Just things like that, you know, like I don't have to ask other people. And the credit cards were kind of like, oh, well, you don't have the money for that. Here, I'll help you. I'll help you out. Mm-hmm. And it was also like a way to avoid shame. So like for me, there's nothing inherently wrong with asking people to like spot you or help you out or whatever. But for me personally, I didn't like asking people for money. And so in order to avoid shame, I could just use my card. Like I could be broke, no income, no cash flow, just a little bit of money in the bank, and I can also hide it. Like I was able to hide the fact that I needed support by just using my cards, because my cards were never put out there that, you know, I needed help. I would just be like, oh, it's fine, and just use my card. And then I also got to act like this also helped me feel, yeah, I guess it was feel, you know, this also gave me the appearance of being independent. So from the outside world, I looked independent because it's like I never asked for any help. I never seemed to struggle. And then for me, myself, I was like, oh God, thank God that I have these cards, because now I do not have to ask anyone for help. And at that time, it was like, I was still in my 20s, like mid 20s. And I didn't have to ask my mom or my parents for help. I could just use the cards. And it was a way of like not having to explain myself to anyone or, you know, like justify any of my actions to anyone. I could just stay independent as long as I had this credit. And I only had to rely on myself. So that was another big thing. Like I had a lot of trouble with in the past. I preferred to rely on myself, not because I liked the idea. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I do things better and that's why I only want to rely on myself. It was like, okay, I really need help. But in the past, asking for help came with like a buttload of guilt and like lecturing and how could you do that? I can't believe you did that. I'm not going to trust you in the future. I'm going to take control of your whole life because you don't know what you're doing in the future. I can help you. That's not the, like, it was like people who could help me and had the resources to help me. But the thing is, the condition was if they help me, they also get to like crap all over my face. So obviously, I'm not going to want, like, obviously I was like, okay, here's another way besides working to death to avoid that, like avoid asking people who do that for help and still get the help that I needed. So it was easier to justify to myself, like, look, there's two choices. It sucks to have debt, but it also sucks way more to have that person or any people or anyone or any institution like lord over you like that. Like, seriously, like, it just got old after a while. What else? It was like a way to, what was going on at that time? Oh, you know what it was? It was a way to maintain appearances because I had like a really good start in life. I mean, there were bumps along the way, but in terms of like material possessions, I had a pretty good start. Like my parents paid for college. I didn't have like, not in terms of clothes and stuff, but like things like, like lessons and like piano lessons, sports, and all the things that I needed, like those type of things. I had a lot of support there. And then the first job I had out of college was like full time, good pay, like it came with all the bells and whistles, like travel, apartment, just everything, like status, like everything was fine. And when I started to pull away from that, because I was like, okay, well, that was cool, but I want to try something else. Like, I want to try something more crazy. I wanted to try entrepreneurship. I wanted to try dipping my toe in like different industries and like kind of playing around instead of doing the safe route or, just doing the route that I knew was going to lead to money. While I was doing that life where people are like, wow, the wanderer, or like, when you see like people who are like, they look like, what do they usually look like? I can't even, those type of people usually look like the people you say like, I lived in a van for a year and like now my hair is purple. And yeah, I didn't look like that. I was able to maintain all the appearances that I had when I had a stable, safe 9 to 5 life, like 9 to 5 job life, and that income. And because I was using my credit cards, even when I didn't have that type of income, I still looked like I lived like that. Like no one ever thought that I was like a wild child or like lost or wandering or anything. They just looked like it to them. They were like, this girl who should be working in accounting is having a very interesting sabbatical because that's where I expect her to be. And that's where I'm assuming she's going to go right after this. So yeah, I guess in a way it served me to maintain my outward appearance, and also too, it did hide a lot of the struggles I had. Like nobody ever thought to help me. A lot of people assumed that I was good. I remember that. Yeah, I remember people thinking like, you're fine. We can tell that you're fine. We can tell that you don't need help. We can tell that you're good. Like we don't know how you're doing it, but no one even questioned it. They're like, yeah, you look like the way you're living seems like you're totally fine in terms of finances. And it was also kind of like a band-aid. It was a band-aid for the things that weren't working in my life. So like obviously at that point there was an issue with me being able to make money flow in, and the decisions I was making weren't, so like even if I made a lot, let's say that, so I think at that time, yeah, I was making okay money, but the way that I was making that money was like really defeating me physically. Like I was always tired and grumpy, and I was like missing family events and holidays and stuff. But again, I didn't notice because I'd have my credit cards to like put a band-aid over that. Like if I didn't have that amount of credit, which was a lot at that time, I think I was like, yeah, I was getting into almost maybe like, well, definitely over 10,000. I'm pretty sure it was over 10,000. If I didn't have that extra 10,000 in credit, I would have realized that the way that I was trying to make money was not sustainable. Like it was not enough for maintaining a happy lifestyle, But I didn't notice that because I had this buffer of $10,000 or more or whatever it was at that time that was like, no, you're fine. But if that whole amount was taken away, I think I would have noticed quicker that the amount of money for the amount of time I was putting in was not enough. Like, it was also too that I thought that, okay, if I worked really, really, really hard and got X amount of money in X amount of time and then vacationed for, I think I was like trying to vacation for 6 months at that time. Yeah, so I'd vacation for 6 months. Like, I'd pay like all of the utilities, the rent, and everything. I'd have all that money ready so that when I vacation, it was just that, and I didn't have to think about money for 6 months. It was like a way of like, oh, don't think about it. And then the Band-Aid was, yeah, so, oh my gosh, I'm getting confused. So I'm like staring at the wall, trying to think back. I should have thought about that before I started. No, it's fine. Are you with me? Are we on the same page? The whole point was it's a Band-Aid. The Band-Aid was the way that I was making money wasn't working for me, and I had $10,000 worth of like leeway in credit to be like, nah, it's fine. Nah, let's try it for one more year. Let's try it for, whatever more months. So it definitely prolonged a decision that wasn't good for me. I mean, not a decision, a situation that wasn't good for me. I think if I felt the burn or the need or like the shrinking of my actual money, I would have made different decisions faster. But I definitely was like a slow burn to, I guess it wasn't even burnout. Yeah, it was burnout, but it was also like a slow ride to like, oh crap, I need to change whatever it is I'm doing because I'm not doing it right. But I mean, whatever, it happened the way it happened. It definitely stalled my next step, and yeah, that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. All right, anyway, third round. So now I'm in the third round, I'm sitting in my debt. Now I'm in the debt. Now it's so much debt that it's like I almost hit the limit of like all my credit cards. So yeah, I hit the limit of almost all my credit cards. I think I had like 4 at the time or something like that, like 4 or 3 significant ones. And there's like no longer abundance associated with this debt because there was no extra. Like, I was like making way more payment. I was making a lot of payments, and then the payments were putting like barely under the minimum. My credit is bad. There's no more of these perks from the cards because now I'm dealing with the really high interest rates that came with them. And so that's what the debt situation was like then in this third wave. And so now when I looked at my debt, I used it as a scapegoat. I was like, okay, all of the unsatisfactory things in my life was because I had debt. Like, now I was like, okay, I'm stressed out because I have debt. I don't have money in abundance and inflow of money because I have debt. So even if I wasn't spending on things, I'd still spend on the payments, all the choices I was making, like, okay, I have to work this job that I don't really like, and I'm working these long hours because of like long hours doing something I don't really like because of the debt. Like, everything was because of the debt. And not only that, like, I was super obsessed with it. Like, I look at it all the time, and I'll like look at how many payments I've made and like how much those payments per month were, and I was just so obsessed with not what I spent or the total amount, but like how much of my current money was going into the payments to pay off this debt. And I would like divide each credit card by a certain amount of months to see how long it would take to get rid of that, and then and then I'd look at like, oh, my lifestyle's gonna suck because of this, and like just every day calculating how long it would take to get rid of this debt. So now it was like the debt took all the focus that I had. It was like I obsessed over the debt. And it also, like, this obsession with the debt was like a way of distracting myself again from seeing all the other things I was unhappy with. So like, I didn't I never stopped and thought like, okay, how's my life treating me right now? How do I feel right now? I was like, no, I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because of the debt, not because of anything else. It was like a really good way of like putting blinders on. And then it was also too like, it ended up being an excuse to stay small. So what I mean by staying small is, if anyone were to like, in the past, I always think like, okay, work, and then go to India, work, and then take 6 months off to learn a new skill. That's how I used to think about money and then the reason I was working. But now I was like, well, for me, the biggest thing in my life is this debt. So I'm going to do what I can, live my life in a way that's going to get rid of the debt, which ended up being a super conservative life in terms of, I guess, risk. So, like, what's the least risky thing you can do in terms of spending money? Live at home with your parents. Um, what's another almost like risk less way of living? To to have a job and never leave it, like to never look outside for another job. And for me, that was really new and weird. And like, I knew that I didn't like that. I knew from day one of working that I never wanted to have just one job or not hop around and stuff. So for me to be like, no, you need to have one job and that's it, and stop looking around at other prospects, like, doesn't matter how the job makes you feel, just as long as it makes you money. That was like a totally novel idea to me, and was also totally wrong and bad for me. But I was like, you know what? This is your punishment. You have debt, so don't even think about any alternatives. You need to learn to live like everyone else and just have one stable job and like not think about it. And so, yeah, it ended up being the reason I stayed small for so long, which I think was like, let's see, this was now 2014, I think. 2014 to almost recently. Yeah, so I stayed at home. I like, what did I do? Oh yeah, I moved back to the US. I let go of my apartment. I decided to live at home, have the car that I had since college, not put any money into it, not buy any new clothes, not do anything, no more like going out and stuff, no more trying to have fun. It was just like, put as much money as you can into your debt, stay small, and live how I thought I was living before I had debt. Remember, like, phase one where I was like, oh, the most important thing is to save. So I thought I was going back to that. That's what I originally thought I was. Like, don't try to have organic food. Don't try to have really quality clothes. Just live as small as possible. And then when I also used the debt as like, sorry, I have like notes that I wrote out, and I wrote them like almost like in a trance, like super fast, and they're just like flowing out of me. So now, and I didn't reread them before I started. So I was like, what was I saying? But yeah, sorry if it's like awkward and choppy. I usually don't write it out, but this is like, again, I wrote it like, just came out of me. Wasn't really thinking, wasn't like over analyzing, but it's all true what I'm saying. So anyways, the next point in this third phase was that it was like a tool for self-blame and constant feeling of shame. So I knew that I felt like a loser. That is first things first. Like, I definitely put myself down a lot. I definitely was like, shame on you. How dare you? Like, look what you did to your life. I really believed that like I was the cause of everything, and that I should definitely not feel okay about it. Like, I was never like, oh, like, I was never like, debt sucks, I need help or whatever. I was just like, you did this to yourself, and this is what you get, and like, you need to work your way out of it, but this is also what you get. So it's kind of like, wow, like, this sucks, I need to move forward. But it was also like, but also you need to dwell on this and like understand that this is your fault. And if that sounds normal to you, like, yeah, it's your fault, you got into debt or whatever, I think you are, maybe you have like a, okay, not you. Sometimes we have a weird understanding of shame and guilt. So like, I used to think that shame and guilt was the natural result of doing something bad. But then I realized shame and guilt is like a underlying problem, like an underlying feeling that people have. So it's not like you feel shame and guilt because like you dropped the milk in a grocery store in front of everyone. It's, you feel shame and guilt for dropping the milk in front of everyone because you always feel shame and guilt, but little things like that will bring it out of you. So like, someone who has no shame and guilt can drop the milk in front of everyone and then laugh and then pay for it and clean it up and think nothing of it. But someone else who drops the milk in front of everyone and still does the same thing, pays, and nobody, like, there's no like other exchange, like explosive exchange between the employees or whatever, that person will feel the shame and guilt because they already had the shame and guilt in them to begin with. And then the milk spilling is just like highlighting it, like, oh, look, see, you're dumb, look what you did. But the other person is like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. Oh well, whatever, fix it and move on. So that when I say that the credit card situation was bringing up feelings of shame and guilt, like it was like a regular everyday reminder to feel shame and guilt about myself and what I've done. It was basically a distraction in a way. So like it was like, no, not a distraction. What's that called? Like when something, like a misdirection. So like I'm like, oh, I know why I feel crappy. I know why I hate myself. I know why my life feels like really down and heavy. It's because I have debt. But it's like, no, actually, the reason you feel that way is because you always feel that way. You always have this like shame and guilt. And like now you're saying like, oh, you have it because of debt. It's like, no, even if you didn't have debt, you would still have it. You just wouldn't be as aware of it. Like you wouldn't know where to put it. You just feel like, oh, I'm sleepy or today or whatever. And it's like, no, I always felt like I had shame and guilt in me. I just didn't know where it was coming from or where to place it. So the debt, having the debt was like an easy way to be like, oh, now I get it. Now I know I hate myself and my life. It's because of the debt. It's like, no, at that moment, did I know that? No. Do I know it now? Yeah. So then also too, it was a self-created obstacle. It was a self-created hurdle that I put up so that I wouldn't explore my creative potential. What do I mean by that? I had always said that I wanted to start my own business, but now I had this like convenient hurdle. I can't start my own business because I don't have the money to invest in it. Why don't I have the money to invest in it? Because I'm in debt. And like, was I going to get out of this debt? I didn't think so. I was like 12,000 into it, and I was like, well, it used to take me a whole year to save $10,000 to $12,000. So like not to save it like to make $10,000 to $12,000, but to save. So like spending and whatever, and then saving on the side an additional $10,000 to $12,000, and then it went from taking a year to do that to 2 years to do that. And then it went from taking 2 years to do that to not being able to save at all. Like it was a weird big cliff. It was like I could save 12,000 a year and it was like no problem. It's like so easy. And then I could do it in 2 years and like even have like big expenses come up. Like my dog got sick and it was like thousands of dollars to like rehab him. And then I went to a point where like for years where I was like, I can't even save. It doesn't even feel like I could save 700. Like that used to be my goal. Try to save 700 a year. And it was like a struggle. So I knew that, well, why did I say that? I don't know. Anyway, my point was I wasn't going to have any extra money to invest. And I was like, well, I guess that's the reason I'm not going to get my business off the ground. Like really convenient excuse I made for myself. Next point in this third round, my debt was a way, at this point, was a way of making me relatable to other people, because I used to not talk about money at all. I felt like really weird about having more money than my friends and stuff, especially, and I'll talk about it later, but like, again, there was this like shame and guilt associated with even when I had money. So having money felt more shameful and guilty than not having money. And now that I had debt, I felt 100% relatable with my people. Who are my people? Black people, people of color. I had a bunch of friends that like suffered and were in debt and like always talked about credit cards and like ways of getting out of it and like that type of stuff. So they talked about money in terms of like payments and things like that. And now I could relate to them. I didn't feel weird about it. I felt like, oh, finally I can join the conversation. I wasn't making it awkward for anyone. I wasn't feeling guilty having money while they didn't. I wasn't feeling like I didn't feel like any of the money that I had in the bank and my savings was because of some unfair advantage and like that they were struggling because of something that they didn't have that I wasn't giving to them. I just felt like, oh, hey, me too. I the things that you guys go through, I go through too. Like this is normal. And now I'm like you guys and one day we'll get out of it together, right? Ha ha ha. Like it was a weird feeling, but I definitely related to more people when I had that debt. Like I just felt like I was part of society And I was a part of the conversation when people talked about like broke college students. Even though I didn't even get broke from that situation, it just, I got a student loan eventually too. So like I did actually feel part of the conversation. I was like, yeah, society is doing this to us and da da da. And I was like, whoa, what the heck? Like I only just recently jumped into this thing, and I jumped into it like later in my 20s, not straight out of college, like undergrad, like everyone else. But I did feel in a weird way connected, and the connection that I felt was like, hey, I'm a victim, you're a victim, we're all victims together. Like, we can feel sorry for ourselves. And it was easier and better to feel sorry for myself than it was to feel like isolated. And again, I already felt shameful and guilty, but now I felt shameful and guilty as a victim. And I don't know if you ever had like a victim narrative, but it's a very comforting narrative. Like, you get to feel like the things that you feel come from someone else. And if only that something else would change, you would feel better. And there's a bunch of other people with you who feel the same way. And it's a community. And it almost is like a feeling of like, oh man, I knew the situation was hard. Thank God it's not my fault. Does that make sense? Like, oh man, having debt sucks, but thank God it's not my fault. It's the way the credit cards are set up. It's the way society's set up. It's the way employers pay people that's the problem. And, of course I'm suffering if that's the case. Like, those people did this to us. Ugh, let's find a way to fix them. Not me, them. And yeah, so basically all the debt that I had at that point was like the physical embodiment, the like outward manifestation of all of the lack of support and love that I felt that was in my life. So like, is that a big jump? It seems like a big jump, but basically if you listen to all the phases, it was always me alone. Like, I always felt isolated in my journey, my money journey, the way I was making it, the way I was saving, the way I was spending. I felt very isolated. And when I looked at the debt at that time and all the decisions I made, it was like, oh, okay, I wasn't independent because I was trying to be independent. I was lacking in support. So could be financial support, but in my mind, in like the way that I saw it, it was like, nobody cares if I'm eating well. Nobody cares if I have enough money to fly home. No one cares if I'm making rent. The only way I can like make sure that I get taken care of is to use my own resources. And once my own resources were gone, people still didn't care, and I know they don't care, so I'm not going to ask. So at least I have these credit cards to like catch me when I fall, until I use them so much that it was like there's no more wiggle room there either. So now I'm sitting with this feeling of like, oh, if I don't have money and I don't have credit, I don't have any support at all. Like, no one is coming to save me. Not because like, it's not no one's coming to save me because I'm bad. It's like no one's coming to save me because no one cares. So if no one cares and I don't have credit and I don't have money, then that's basically like, that's the end. But I didn't notice that until I saw it. I was like, why did I spend all that money on these little things, medical bills and things like that? Oh yeah, because I don't have anyone who has my back. It would have had to been me. And what else? It was an unconscious way of, oh, I see. Yeah. So since I felt that way, having the debt and talking about my debt to other people, especially people that I felt like could have helped me, was a way of like, I got to use it as a giant ball of evidence that they should have helped me. Does that make sense? So like when people used to say things like, oh, you're fine, like you can afford things, like you can like, I remember something like my car got smashed in, and then my aunt was like, you can just afford to get another car. And I was like, no, I can't. And she's like, yeah, you can. And I was like looking at her, and I was like, yeah, does anybody see that I need support? Like, I never said that I needed support, but I wanted the fact that I had debt and all these problems in my life to be like a signal, like a bat signal to people, to be like, yeah, actually, I do need support and you're not giving it to me. And I really hope that you, even if you don't help me, I hope that you feel sorry for me. Like, you feel pity for me. Like, you can't help me, but my life is in shambles. I wanted people to recognize that I needed help and they weren't giving it to me. And as a result, I was suffering from it. I just wanted people to see that I was suffering, and having that amount of debt and also like a stalled lifestyle was helping me have like a badge of honor. Not a badge of honor, but like a evidence that, like, yeah, see, told you I needed help. Like, told you I was struggling, and told you like no one had my back. Because I think too, like at that time, for many years, like people assumed that the good things that I had came from my parents, and then they just didn't even see the struggle. Like, they didn't assume that I would be struggling. So having the fact that I was struggling and had debt was like almost like a symbol for me, like, hey, see, told you, like, no one had my back, not my parents. I know you guys think that, but it's not true. And I just want everybody to acknowledge that, like, acknowledge that I don't have help, acknowledge that I'm struggling and nobody cares. And you should all feel a little bit of shame for it, and feel bad. And if you don't give me money, that's fine too, because I don't want money. What I want is like to be seen and to have some sort of, I don't want to keep saying pity. What is it called? Like sympathy? Like, I wanted people to sympathize with where I was at, which is also too like another narrative of being a victim. Like, I would rather people feel sorry and bad for me for having the debt that I had than to help me get out of it. Like, you know, I think at that time I just wanted acknowledgement and like not even support, but you know what I mean? Like, I wanted a pity party. I wanted a pity party. And, you know, having that debt, as much as it sucked, was helping me. It didn't even really help that bad, but in my mind, it was like, oh, if I need to use the pity party card, I could use it. It's like right here. Like, I can just show anybody my bank account and they'd be like, oh man, that sucks. Like, yeah, I can relate. Or, oh, it must be hard. Or, oh, why isn't anyone helping you? Okay, that was a long one. It was long because it was the most recent, and it was, I think it was also like the one that took me the longest to like figure out. I was like, oh, like that's actually what was really going on. And now the fourth wave, this fourth whatever phase that I'm talking about, this is kind of like where I started to get support. And even though it's like a very passive phase, like it's not like I really did anything to get to the fourth phase, and it's not really like the fourth phase is over. It's kind of the one I'm currently in. But it was like one little tiny switch that I made, and the tiny switch that I made was that I decided I was going to be vulnerable. So like a part of being vulnerable is like the podcast thing that I'm doing right now. And then the other part of being vulnerable was like, okay, I'm going to try to tell someone else what I feel and why without trying to control their actions. So I wasn't going to get a pity party response. I wasn't aiming to get a pity party response. I wasn't aiming to validate or excuse myself. I was just going to tell someone how I thought and felt about my situation and what I was afraid of receiving. So basically, what I decided to say to someone was, I need help with my finances, but I don't believe I deserve help for my finances. I think it's like selfish and irresponsible of me to do it. And it's also scary for me to ask for help from people that I feel like can punish me or use it against me later. So I said that out loud. And I also said, but I'm open to receiving help now. So basically, I need help. I'm scared. And I'm now open to receiving help, even though I'm still scared of what all that means. So after I said that, I got my first wave of help, which was $1,500. Yeah, it was exactly $1,500. And I'm now going to like point by point, this is what happened during that fourth phase. So this is like the new admission of needing help. So during this fourth wave, like the debt didn't really change. Like the most that I got in the beginning of like influx of help was 1,500, and at this point I think I was like up to like 12,000 in credit card, like about 12,000 in credit card debt. So even though it was like the highest it had ever been, it the debt became like a smaller part of my life. I wasn't like focused on it all the time. It did still invoke guilt in me, but like not that much. It was there, but it was not like this big gnawing thing that I had, like a daily thing. Um, it drew in guilt free support. So now, even though like I still had a little bit of guilt, it was way, way, way smaller than before. Like it was just like a little tinge sometimes. Like whenever I had to make a payment with money that wasn't mine, like money that was given to me, I felt a tinge of shame, but not as much, like just a little tinge. Like I don't even know what to explain, how to explain it. Like it was a little like I don't want to pay my bills because it's not my money, and then I would just like think about it for maybe 2 or 3 days the week that I had to pay it, and then it would just like go away, but I would still do it. Um, and then it was still like the debt that I have now was still a reminder that I have a fear of an outward flow of money. So even having the money to pay off, to like make the payments, it's like part of the thing that like stung was that it was a reminder that I don't like spending money. Like even when it's helping me, even when I have it, even when there's support, the act of spending money, it still burns. Like it's a thing, it sounds weird, it sounds dumb, but it's like, why does it matter? Like no one likes spending money. Like no, I can spend money on other people, no problem, feels good. Spending money on myself or like helping my situation, it still burned a little. And like every time I did it or do it now, like I still think like, wow, that's really weird that it hurts more to better myself than it does to like sit in the debt. All right, and then it slowly started becoming less of an independence crutch. So I told you before, like I really felt independent when in that second phase, when I was like, I had this debt and this debt's going to help me never need to need another person ever again. And like now, I don't even view my credit card, I don't view my credit limit as an expression of independence. So I have more wiggle room than I had in the past because now some of my cards are being paid off. And I don't look at it as like, okay, now I can not ask this person for money. Now I don't have to depend on this person for food or whatever. I don't look at it like that at all. I just don't even, it doesn't even register as anything. It's just nothing to me now. It's also not so much of a like bragging right of validation and abundance as it used to be. And I got this reminder when I was talking with a friend who was telling me about her cards and like the benefits that come with it and things like that. And I remember just being like trying to be supportive and like not judgmental, but it was like I was cringing inside because like, oh, that's how I used to talk. Like I used to talk about credit cards and their perks and like the ones I had as if it was like I had a Maserati. Like, oh, I have this card and it has this many miles and like this is the benefits of it and like, oh, it's so amazing. And it was just like, why was I doing that? You know? And I try not to label things as good or bad, but seriously, I was like, that's what I was doing. I was boasting about the type of credit cards I had, and hearing someone else do it, I had all the like sympathy, I guess, in the world. I was trying to be like, it's okay. Like they are excited about this. Like let them be excited. But really in the inside, I was just like, man, that used to be me. And I did that, bragged about cards while having so much debt on my cards. Like, it just didn't make any sense. It was just really cringy. And now I don't use my, like, the type of cards I have as bragging rights. I don't use the amount of debt I have as a bragging right. Like, hey, I'm just like you. And I don't use the fact that I'm paying them off as a bragging right, for obvious reasons too, because it's like, it's not me like, oh yeah, I'm rich now and I can do this. It's like I was open to receiving help, and that's how things are getting better. Um, which again, there's like a tinge of guilt there, but we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about, yeah, there's like a tinge of guilt, like what people are helping you or like outside things are helping you. Like, that's not cool. Like, you should be doing it yourself. Like, yeah, we'll get to that. Um, and so, okay, next point. Now that I think about in this fourth phase and I think about my debt, it doesn't seem as impossible to pay off. So, like, I'm not saying I'm 100% like, oh, it's going to be gone. It just does. I don't have that underlying feeling of like, this is never going away, which I used to have. I used to have this like, there is no way ever in my life this is going away. Remember, I used to calculate the months it's going to take per card to like put it down. No, I don't do that anymore. It's just a background thing that I'm not avoiding, but it doesn't, it's not on my mind. It also doesn't feel like a punishment or shame to receive help. So I think I said that like over and over again, but that is a major theme of this phase. Getting help from people, it doesn't feel shameful anymore. And it doesn't feel like that, like where I'm getting the help from or the people who are helping me or the source of the help is going to punish me. It doesn't feel like it's like, and now you owe me. Like, I paid off your credit card and now your debt is to me forever. It doesn't feel like that at all. It absolutely feels like just a natural thing that should happen. Like, someone needs help and they get help. Someone needs food and they get food. It doesn't feel like a punishment. It doesn't feel like a shameful hammer coming down on me. And oh, another big thing, my life right now, regardless of how it looks on the outside, it feels very rich. I feel very comfortable, even though I have debt. So that was a big shift. There was a point where I had my own apartment, 2 incomes, and I wasn't working hourly, but it didn't feel like enough because I was always looking at like, what would that money do for me in terms of paying off the debt? What would that money get me in terms of how many vacations I could take and like how many months of rent I could pay? So it didn't feel like a lot. But now I don't feel like my life feels very rich. I feel like I have really good food, really comfortable settings, really good water. I feel like I have a really healthy, like, wow, this is a great lifestyle. Like, I feel like I have a quality, great, full lifestyle, even though that debt is still there. So it's not gone yet, and I still feel like really good, really happy. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing fine, totally fine. And it also doesn't feel irresponsible to live like that. It's like, it doesn't feel bad or wrong to think that I have like this really full life, even though the debt is still there. I don't feel any type of like, you shouldn't live this well, you shouldn't eat this well, you shouldn't have what you have if you have debt. It feels very balanced. Like, it's okay to live like this, and it's not irresponsible to still have debt. It just doesn't at all, like, the debt doesn't at all feel like a factor in how I should be feeling in my life right now. And it doesn't dictate my decisions, my work or spending decisions like it used to. So I'm not saying that I'm not conscious of it. I'm not saying that I don't know it exists. Like, for example, if I want to buy something that's like $3,000, it's not like I don't know that I can't afford that or that I could have paid it off with one card. It's that I don't make decisions based on the credit limit. So when I'm making a decision, I think like, do I need it now? Do I need it later? Is it going to help my environment is it not going to help my environment? Am I doing it? Am I spending because I'm bored, or am I spending because I actually want it? Am I trying to not spend because I would rather have money, or am I trying to not spend to be responsible? So those are the questions I ask myself when I spend. I don't ask, it has nothing to do with like whether I'm going to get out of debt in 2 weeks or 2 years. Like none of the debt I have factors into my decision making. And at the same time, it's not making it worse. Like I'm not using credit to spend. I'm just making decisions about how to spend as if I had no debt. Does that make sense? I don't know it sounds crazy to say like you don't make decisions based on your debt, and then you would imagine that I'm going out there with my credit card and doing everything, but it's like as if I don't have credit cards. Does that make sense? Like I don't even think about it as having credit cards. Like I know where my credit cards are, but I don't know how much is in each one. I don't know. I don't even reach for them. I literally make decisions about spending as if I don't have. Like the credit card makes zero influence over my spending decisions. Okay, so then I also see my current credit card situation, debt situation, as like a totally different life. Like it's a totally different part of my reality and identity. Like I don't even, the person who racked up all that debt, I can't even remember that person, like how I felt in that moment. I can't even remember the stress that I had and how I felt. Like it's like almost like I watched a movie and then I was like trying to tell the movie to someone else, and I was like, oh, and then I think this happened, something like that, like, oh, and then I think the last ending thing was this, and I don't remember. I have to watch that movie again. That's how it feels like a million years ago, but it was literally, it had to have been like last summer. So it was probably the summer of 2017 that I like, now it's like all fuzzy. Like what happened after that? I don't know. Like something there happened and then I felt better. But yeah, that's how close it was. And even now it's like January 2018. It feels like a million years ago. And I'm also thankful, like, because of that, because of like the current way that